get started. For anyone who is just joining us here on Zoom or on Facebook, this is the SciStarter live webinar that happens once a week. We talk about different projects or topics, and today we're going to be talking about photography, Nature Photography 101, talking about how to make or to take great photos with your phone, or if you're able to use better supplies as in a really nice camera and such as you level up through time. We'll probably talk through some of those tips too. So for getting started, we will help you out, and then you're always in an area where there's room to grow. So you're in a starting position that's quite nice. All right, as always, I'm just going to introduce us first, and then we will move forward. So I'm Emma. I'm a program coordinator for SciStarter. I host these webinars along with work on a lot of other projects, especially with libraries. So if any of you are in the library scene, I'll talk about that a little bit today too. Roland, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Roland, Quality Assurance Coordinator and Developer for SciStarter, and I'll be dropping the links today as usual.
Awesome. And then Trevor is with us every once in a while, and he's not here today, but this is another face you'll see in these calls as well. And then Damon, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, my name is Damon Tai. I work in biotech, but I have a huge passion as a naturalist. I spend a lot of time on iNaturalist. I'm covering near 80,000 observations at this point. I used to be a national lab researcher on the Human Genome Project, a photographer in a former life. So all this kind of wraps together into some of the stuff I'm going to share with you guys today.
Excellent. Awesome. All right. A couple of things before we get started. I mentioned this earlier. You can use the chat and the Q&A as part of a webinar. So if you have questions, you can drop them in the Q&A, especially if it's specific to the projects that we're talking about, citizen science as a whole, SciStarter, et cetera. You can drop those in the Q&A so we can answer them for everyone. If you have commentary about things or something to share, we'd love to see it in the chat so that we can see all of that there too. And we can hear your thoughts on things. And just to make sure you know how to use it, thank you, Suzanne, for starting us off there. You can go ahead and write your name and introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like. My name is Emma. As I mentioned, I'm calling in from Phoenix, Arizona. So happy to be here. So you can do that in the meantime. While we're doing that, we do want to set some basics of who we're talking to. So a couple of polls are going to show up, one of which is the have you ever participated in a citizen science project before? So maybe you're an iNaturalist fan, maybe you're an eBird fan. Those are the two that we're talking about a bit today. And then maybe you're a teacher who does citizen science and don't even know it yet. Who knows? The maybes. My friends who are maybes, I'm curious if you're going to find out if yes, you have done it or confirming what you're doing. I feel like I should add an option that's yes question mark instead of the maybe, just so it's like an assumed, it's a maybe, but we're going to say yes because we think if you're at least a little bit maybe, then you probably did one. Awesome. Cool. We're at 83%. I think that's solid. Awesome. Most of you are yeses. Awesome. I'm just curious if you have the immediate answer on hand and you haven't done a million different projects, go ahead and type in which project you've been involved in. I'm curious to see how many iNaturalists I'm going to see. Awesome. All right. Second question, quiz time. Have you ever been to one of these events before? A webinar on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. You listen to me ramble on about all kinds of stuff. And now you're going to be forever convinced to come back every week. Awesome. Oh, great. Cool. Okay. A good majority of you have not been to these before. I'm happy to have you on board. I hope you will come back to our next ones. It's about auroras next week and about photography of auroras. So that'll be cool. And I'm seeing those lists of projects. Yeah. Great backyard bird count. iNaturalist. Love it. iNaturalist among others. Cool. Awesome. Hi, Bob. Awesome. We have our podcaster online with us. Cool. All right. And then lastly, we want to know what type of human you are. Are you a student? Are you an aspiring citizen scientist? Are you a seasoned citizen scientist? Are you a parent? Or sorry, I already said that. Teacher, educator, troop leader, librarian, library person, staffer, researcher, project leader, all kinds of things. Board person on the internet. We have one. We have one. Looking for more. Who else is a board person on the internet? Coco Roz is totally a citizen science project. Yes, Helene. I assume it's Helene, but hopefully, okay. Yeah, happy to have you on board. Coco Roz is definitely an option. West Central Ohio. Nice. All right, let's see. We've got a lot of seasoned and aspiring citizen scientists and a bunch of teachers / educators, troop leaders, etc. Happy to have you on board. Awesome. Yeah, go and teach your Girl Scout troop about your nature photography after this. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Now that we've gotten to know each other a little bit more, I'm going to go through and set some basics for you so you can understand all the vocabulary. Oh, and I love the options in the chat for which projects you're a part of. Globe at Night, Project Squirrel, Frogwatch, eBird, love it. Okay, cool. So citizen science in general is a collaboration between scientists and those of us who are curious, concerned, and motivated to make a difference. It's how people can make an impact on issues they care about and help science. So, and there's more information on the link that Roland just dropped. This is also known as a lot of different things. So if you've heard of neighborhood science, community science, participatory science, etc., it might be just connected to citizen science too. So depending on where you are, who you're working with, you can hear different words for it. So also, if you are interested in citizen science, the #1 step in all of our brains, even though we are technically working with SciStarter, is still to join SciStarter. By having an account, you can have, well, you already have access without having an account to this database of citizen science projects, but as an account holder, you can go in and save a bunch of projects, and you can organize them in ways through lists, and also just discover ones that you've never heard of before. We do our best to make sure that we are a database of everything that we can find that is citizen science. And if you can't find one that you want, send us a message. We might be able to figure out where there is one. And as a part of being on SciStarter, there's an affiliate program. So if you are signing up for projects that are affiliates, that allows you to track your participation. I'm marking this now because we have the project finder, which if you were to click advanced search here, you'll see our project finder, and you can also just go to scistar.org/finder. And by going on there, you can find ways in which to find to do nature photography specific projects. So our recommendation is to head over there, find something on a topic you care about, find the list anyway. And when you go into each project, if you find the area that says task, if it says document photos, document by taking photos, take photos of, etc., you know that you're looking at a nature photography type of project. So just keep that in mind when you're going through the advanced search. You can make a point to use what the knowledge you earn today to use in the projects that you do later. So moving forward, step 2/3 of being a SciStarter account holder, we have training. So if you ever feel like you need a boost in confidence or it needs some background information, we have a Foundations of Citizen Science training that will lead you to accessing a bunch of other training. So if you are teachers, I saw some of you were teachers, these building data literacy and the teaching in higher ed are both really solid for teacher related activities. I loved this one so much. As a former 5th grade teacher, this was one that I wish I had used. Libraries as community hubs for citizen science is a big one for learning how to bring citizen science into your library. So even if you're not a library staff or anything, learning about what's going on there can help you help your library, which is a really important thing for the future. All right, so we're talking about nature photography. So I will pass it on to Damon momentarily. I'm just going to tell you how to get to iNaturalist as an affiliate before I move forward. So in the chat, Roland just dropped a couple links for you. When you go to iNaturalist, you can go to our affiliate page for iNaturalist, and when you add it to your dashboard and hit participate, you can sign up using the same email as your SciStarter account. By doing that, it helps us link the two accounts so we can keep track of your contributions and let you know what your contributions are. So if you're looking for evidence of service, or you would just want to know how many contributions you make, this is really helpful for that. In addition to sharing the same email, though, you also have to write in your account username from iNaturalist into your SciStarter information. So in that second link, the scistarter.org/dashboard/settings, when you scroll down, you'll see a spot for integration affiliation. So you can drop your username in there, and then you're going to be able to track your work over time. So pretty exciting to see over like a year, seeing how many contributions you made. It'll update once a day or whatnot, and then you can just see how much of an impact you've made. So hopefully, I hope you all use that to your advantage. All right, without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Damon. Thank you for your patience. Let me know when you want me to switch the slide.
All right, sounds good. So why talk about nature photography? Well, it's the core piece for a lot of different citizen science projects because visual information is stuff that's now very easy to get, because everybody's got a cell phone and a camera on them all the times. And it's a way to actually go out in the world with intention. And what you end up finding is if you go out in order to photograph things, you end up finding more things. So it helps you develop this personal connection to nature. It also then, because you're out there documenting stuff, it allows researchers and other people that are interested in these things to access those things you're documenting, which does an enormous amount of good as far as us understanding species biogeography, which we know is changing with climate change. And iNaturalist, I've got some kind of personal case stories around that, which we might get to later. And through being able to take good photographs, what you'll end up doing is making higher quality data. And so that's why we want to spend time thinking about how do I make good observational data with photographs for people to look through. And in the process of trying to make those photographs, what you'll realize is you end up also understanding the organism more, because you're going to spend a little more time trying to get that good photograph than you would with just kind of a run by and a shoot. And so you'll also end up learning more about that individual organism. So our goal for this is to ultimately end up with photos that have good composition, color, and then all the aspects of an organism that'll make it possible for someone to identify it. And I know you might be thinking, well, it just seems like the last half of that is what we really need to do. I really just need to have those aspects that are good for somebody that's going to try to identify it. That is true, but remember, we're all people that like things when they look better. And so if you take clear photographs, they've got good color, the frame is filled, you can see stuff that's lit well, you will get a lot more attention on the things you're submitting to platforms like iNaturalist and like eBird if they've got some kind of like aesthetics to them already. And that's what I would consider the kind of the art side of the photography. So next slide, we're going to jump into some of those art aspects and kind of how to kind of drill those out. So I used to teach photography to high school way back in the day, and I've done it to adults. So I just want to give you some of the general rules that will make the biggest impact for you taking good photographs that are aesthetically pleasing, which will then trick more people into wanting to look at your photographs and identify who's actually there. The first thing is composition. So if you first give somebody a cell phone and tell them to go take photographs of stuff, what do they usually do? The organism is usually right in the center of the photograph and you're 20 feet away. And someone's asking you, can you identify this mushroom for me? And I'm like, it's a brown blob. I am not sure. So the biggest things are they'll bring people's eyes in is how you compose the image and then making sure you're filling the frame as much as you can with the organism of interest. So in composition, and for those of you that have taken a painting class, not much happens from painting to the time of photography. We're still using the same general rules of composition. So if you can put the subject off center a little bit, what that causes somebody's eye to do when they're looking at a rectangular frame is our eyes usually go straight to the center of the frame. So we don't need to put something there because somebody's eye is already going to go there. But if you put it now, the subject out to the corner a little bit, what will happen is their eye will look there and it'll have to look someplace else to find the subject. Every moment that you can buy of someone's attention makes for better composition. So the first one, just get that subject out of the center. Use one of those kind of like blue round corners that you see on that internal rectangle as the center point for where your subject is, and you'll get more eyes on your stuff. The next one is a little bit more difficult, but this is one of the ones that really pays off big time. This is what's known as an S-curve. And so the idea is that you'll have some sort of line that runs from one corner of the image all the way down through the center and then to the opposite corner. And so this is what it looks like in a vertical frame. You can imagine flipping this on its side and you can get the same thing with a horizontal. And actually, if we look down beneath it in each one of these, I've tried to give you representations of what that looks like. So the S-curve, since it's hard to kind of see sometimes, let me walk you through it. So with this trillium flower here, we've got the leaf almost runs to that far top corner and it comes down. Our subject is there. It's not quite in the center because your eye kind of lands up here where there's contrast. And then there's some sort of like squiggly stuff that goes on. And then it sort of comes down and exits out the bottom. Remember, composition isn't hard and fast. It's generally ways to put things in frame. But this now will buy somebody a lot more time with your image than if it was just this photograph with that right in the center and kind of backed out a bit. The other one that gets commonly talked about in composition is the rule of thirds. And this is something that doesn't get used as much in things like iNaturalist and eBird, because this is typically for landscapes. However, sometimes you might be taking photographs of plants in landscapes in order to give the habitat. And so being able to do a rule of thirds composition is useful there. And the general idea with rule of thirds is, since you're trying to keep the subject right out of the square center, your subjects are either going to be at this top line or the bottom line. And in a landscape, that means you either have land filling up 2/3 of the frame, or you would have sky coming down and filling up 2/3 of the frame. And once again, your eye is going to look towards the center of that rectangle and then have to move up or down, which is going to buy more time. And we can kind of loosely see that here with this photograph of some Pinus radiata. So there's about 1/3 of sky up here, 2/3 land, and then our subject is coming right there through the top, not in the center of the frame. And so those general compositional techniques are things to practice, and it takes a while to kind of do this, to think about it a handful of times, but I would say after going out and doing this 3 or 4 times, it becomes second nature. In fact, most of us are consuming so much visual information these days that you might already internally understand this composition without thinking about it. But it might be worth it to look at some of the photographs you've already taken and say, hey, how did I compose this if you hadn't thought about it before? And then go and try and reshoot some of those things with these compositional techniques in mind. So in the next slide, we'll talk about a very critical thing when it comes to photography, which is lighting. So we can do a super deep dive if we've got DSLRs and things like that and getting the right exposure and all of this. And that's a whole half an hour in its own. But a lot of us, we're going to start going out using iNaturalist, eBird, and a lot of these other visual platforms, probably with our cell phone. And so I want to kind of highlight some of these cell phone tricks that are really, really useful when it comes to lighting. Thankfully, thanks to algorithms and things like that, I don't even have to think about exposure anymore, because usually my camera is doing it for me and usually does a pretty good job. So if I've got stuff that's more or less the same contrast, most traditional cell phones now will get you perfect kind of renditions where you can see detail in the shadows and you can see it in the bright stuff. However, though, occasionally I might be shooting something that is very high contrast. So for example, this chanterelle mushroom is sitting on a black background. Chanterelles are pretty bright orangey yellow mushroom. And if it's on just a traditional background, that mushroom is going to get completely blown out, i.e. I'm not going to be able to see the texture of the gills, which in this case is going to be very, very helpful for identifying this organism. So the trick that you can do is this. You can first put your shadow over your subject to get normalized light. So that's the first trick, is always shoot in the shadows if you can. I know for most of us we see this with like family photographs all the time, right? You move everyone in the bright sunlight and then everyone's like missing their nose and stuff like that. Same thing with all the organisms out there. If they're in bright light, you're going to lose texture. So first thing I do a lot of times with the small thing is I will block it so that I'm shooting in my own shadow, and you'll get much better texture using the onboard algorithms in your cell phones. If that's not working though, or you can't put your shadow over it because it's huge, what you can do is when you have your camera open on your cell phone, and this works for the Androids and for the iPhones, if you hold down as you're trying to take a photograph, a little thing will come up that says AF/AE lock. And this is just autofocus and auto exposure now is locked. And if I drag my finger up and down on my phone, it will change the exposure. And so what I could do in this case is I can decrease the exposure, and all of a sudden I'll have that photograph on the left of this slide where those gills are visible. And so that's the way to overcome really, really bright lighting. But once again, first way to handle it is try to get it into shadow. Try to minimize how much light and dark you have going on in your image, and you'll get really, really great images. Go ahead and move on to the next slide. Another thing, and this is something that took me a while to realize was, and this is surprising because I'm a molecular biologist, I should know this, majority of life is smaller than us. It operates on scales that we are not at. And so if you really want to see diversity, you've got to really be able to get in close on stuff. And some of the contemporary cell phones are starting to come already with some macro lenses built in where you can start zooming and all of a sudden like, whoa, I can actually zoom in and see that. Amazing. But a lot of them don't. So there are these really cheap tools that you can find online by just searching clip-on macro lens, and they're actually so useful. I wear them on my hat all the time. And all this does is it's going to go over the top of your cell phone. And now I'm just going to get really, really close to things. And all of a sudden I can photograph things that I would have never have tried before. And this will radically change your experience going out in the world. What used to be like, a 15-minute walk to the end of the block now becomes a 3-hour expedition where you're going to find, 5 times as many organisms just because you were aware that you can see them. The biggest trick with these that's hard to learn for most people is you just want to get close. So instead of waiting for your camera to focus, just move your phone closer until it is in focus. So a primary example here is this little tiny plant that's known as a Nemocladus. This is the classic belly plant, which means you have to be on your belly in order to be able to see them. And with a regular cell phone, you really can't see the flower. However, though, with one of these little clip-on macro lenses, all of a sudden I can get that photograph of that flower that otherwise is just kind of a white spot in my normal cell phone photographs. I know people will get excited about these and they'll be like, oh, I need to get the best one. Don't bother. I gave myself $100 7 years ago, and I bought all the different levels you could buy. The $40 one was marginally better than the 50-cent one. And especially the first one of these you have, you'll probably lose because they are small, and that's why you'll want to learn to clip it onto something. So I would say just buy the cheapest one you can to start off with, get used to using it, and then if you feel the need, then you can upgrade. But this is basically like walking out in the field now with a dissecting scope, which is so, so cool. So on to the next slide. So our goal in the documentation side of photography is that you can think about this like writing an essay with images. And what you're trying to explain to somebody is, what is this organism that I'm getting to see out in the field? And so you're going to use multiple photographs to hopefully kind of distill out some of the essential details that would allow an expert to identify the genus or the species. Now, remember, I'm a molecular biologist. So when I got started in this, I knew nothing. I definitely was the person just taking a single photograph and then walking away thinking I was going to get something. And then experts on iNaturalist would be like, hey, great first photograph, but could you get me shots of X, Y, or Z? And so what I'm going to walk you through in the next couple of slides are those things that these experts have been asking of me for the last 10 years on iNaturalist that will help you be able to get photographs in the field where when you upload them to iNaturalist, somebody will probably get you down to genus or maybe even species in a lot of these cases. One thing to remember, though, is every taxa is a little different, right? So there's going to be different attributes we have to look at for all of them. But 2 big things to think about you can kind of do for every organism is get one shot where the organism fills your entire frame. That's the number 1 shot to get. Number 2 shot is actually get the scene setting. Where is that organism? With a lot of things like plants and fungi and insects, being able to see the ecosystem around them, what plants they're associating with, or what other animals they might be interacting with, helps people understand what that is that you're looking at. So you can almost just put that on your to-do list. Frame filling shots and a habitat shot will up your game big time for at least iNaturalist and eBird from what I've seen. So let's go into the first one of these kind of documentation pieces, which is going to be, we're going to look at plants. And plants are a good one to start with, mainly because they don't move on you, which means you can really get in there and make sure you get all your shots. Unlike insects, you'll get one shot and they'll try to run away from you. So first shot here, we've got a full body shot of this organism. I've got the flowers, I've got the leaves. I'm not digging up the ground to look at the roots because that would be unjust for the plants. And remember, you want to be ethical when you shoot, because you can stress things out, especially animals, if you're in their face a whole bunch with the camera. And we can dig into that a little bit later. So there's the first shot, that full frame filling one. The one beneath that, here's my habitat shot. So I all of a sudden know this isn't the understory of a forest. I'm out in a giant open plain here, and this organism is there. So for an expert, that might allow you to go, well, in this genus, these are in the forest, these are in open situations, this is what we're looking at. For plants, you always want to try to get a shot of the leaf. And if you can, get a shot of the top of the leaf and the underside of the leaf. Every once in a while, that underside is the break point for a species. And so if you can get top and bottom, that really, really helps. And sometimes I like to not have my hands in photographs as much as possible. But sometimes when you get a really kind of messy background going on, I will jam my hand in there and put the leaf in front of it. So that way we can tell what the structure of the leaf is. Is there a serrated edge? Is it smooth? Things like that. And then, of course, you want to shoot the thing that we're all drawn to with plants, which is their flowers and their fruits. If you can get flowers and fruits, these are a lot of times taxonomic key points for plants. If you can get these 4 things on most things, at least I've seen in North America, somebody's going to get you down to a genus, no problem. In fact, iNaturalist's AI is getting scary good, where the AI will probably get you down to a genus if you can provide that first good photograph of the full body shot. So plants are the easiest things to get because they don't move again. So let's go to the next easiest thing, which are fungi that also don't move a whole bunch on you. There's a couple of them that might crawl away from you if they're on insect, but for the most part, they're pretty steady state. So similar thing, we want a full body shot. And when I'm doing the full body shot on the mushroom, really what I'm thinking about is I'm getting all of these different kind of taxonomic features that mycologists want, which is I want to see the gills, I want to see what color they are, I want to see how they attach. I want to see, is there stuff on the stem, something like a partial veil, like you see here with this Amanita? And then what does the base of the stem look like? Because the base of the stem on a variety of genera can help you understand which species you're at. So with Amanitas, it is critical that you have a photograph of the base of the stem. And then I can have my habitat shot. This is not the best shot. I will agree, because I just have the grass there and I have some pine needles. What I would really want with this is if I were to back away a little bit and photograph, so I saw the grassy lawn with the pine tree in the background. But even with this not so great habitat shot, I have an additional piece of information that allows me to figure out what this species is, because I can see those pine needles there. And I know that this Amanita specifically associates with pines. The gill attachment is really important. And so if you can get a close-up shot of the gill attachment for fungi, this will make every mycologist's life easier on iNaturalist. And then, like I said, if you can get the bottom of the stem, mycologists like to call it stipes. So if somebody says on iNat, can you get a better picture of the stipe? They're just talking about the bottom of the stem. So get a picture of that, and then get a picture of the cap. And basically you're looking for, is there tissue on the cap, and is there striation on the edge of the cap? If you can get those, most mycologists will do their best to get you down to genus and maybe species. But in North America, we're going through a giant naming shuffle due to DNA sequencing, really changing our knowledge about mushrooms. And this is a really cool other citizen science thing that you should look into, because it's going to blow up in the next 2 or 3 years. So on from fungi, let's look at our next taxa.
Before you move on, actually, do you know
yeah.
what that citizen science project is for the DNA related things? We can look it up later and send it out.
Right now there is one called Fundus, which is the Fungal Diversity Survey. And it's a nonprofit group that's basically helping people work with platforms like iNaturalist and Mushroom Observer to make good observations and then send their material in to get sequenced.
Excellent.
And I can send you notes on that later if you want to talk to them.
Would love it. Thank you.
Yep, you got it. So now things that will try to get away from you. Lizards and snakes. And this will go back to the safety thing again, right? So with the mushrooms and plants, there's not many of them that we have to worry about too much getting close to, although there's some, right, that have contact dermatitis when we talk about plants, things like poison oak and ivies and things like that. So it's always good before you go into the field someplace to just do a quick look for toxic and deadly things in the environment. And Google is so good now that you can do this for most places. You could be like, I'm in California, what things should I worry about? I'm in Kansas, what things should I be worried about? And they can usually give you a quick list. And what I would do then is I would then take those to iNaturalist and I would look at some of those in my state. So I have a visual recognition of what those look like. Snakes and lizards, some of those snakes can be things you don't want to be too close to, right? And so this is one you want to be safe about what you're doing. And it can also stress some of them out too, to have somebody in their face. So this is one of those ones, if you have a DSLR, this is probably the better way to go after them, is with a DSLR camera, to give them some space for their benefit and for yours potentially. But for snakes, lizards, other kinds of reptiles, and even some of those amphibians like salamanders and stuff like that, you'll primary shot again, get that whole organism. I want to see that whole organism. And then especially for snakes and lizards, getting a shot of the head is something that has been beaten into me by snake and reptile experts on iNaturalist, because if you see the scales on this snake head, this is a sharp tail snake, where the scales are laid out can help you identify species for a lot of snakes and for a lot of lizards. And so being able to get a nice clear headshot is really important. And then also get the tail end of the critter too, because some of those tails can be really helpful in identifying them as well. So this one is called a sharp-tailed snake. And as you can see, its tail comes to a sharp little point, hence the name. And so these are the 3 shots that I would try to go after with the reptiles and the serpents. Let's go ahead and go to the next one. Spiders. I know this is the slide I should have given warning on, because some people are right now going like this from their screen, but they're really cute, at least the jumping spider. So that's why we're looking at a jumping spider and not like a creepy crawly one. First shot again, full organism. And if you can, which is going to be really easy with jumping spiders, you want to get their full body shot with a shot of their front eyes. Jumping spiders, for whatever reason, I think it's because they're little aggressive little buggers. Whenever they see a glass lens in front of them, I think they see a reflection of themselves and they're like, whoa, who is that? Let me get closer, let me get a look. So it's usually pretty easy to get this whole organism shot. If you just give the spider time to see a lens, they will come towards you. Don't freak out though. Jumping spiders are not dangerous. Other spiders do not do this. So you can point it at like a black widow. Black widow is not going to be like, I want to come investigate that. It seems to be only jumping spiders are into this. You'll also want to get a side body shot for spiders, specifically so that you can see any eyes that are on the side of the head. Eye configuration for spiders is one of the things that's used in identification. So that front shot and that side shot is what's going to allow a spider expert to help you get this down to genus and maybe species. And then the last shot I usually try to get is the abdomen shot, because the patterning on the back of a lot of spiders is very, very distinct. And so seeing that sometimes, some people can be like, oh, that is that spider. So if you can get those 3 shots, most of your spiders on iNaturalist will get down to genus, if not species. The spider community on iNat is amazing. They love giving feedback, helpful feedback. And what I always find exciting is there's still a lot for us to learn in North America, even with jumping spiders. I get requests all the time of like, if you ever see this again, you know, can you get a permit to then collect this? So getting good photographs of spiders is really helpful for us understanding new species, even in North America. Go ahead and go to that next slide. Beetles are one that, I mean, they have been loved by biologists for ages because they can have such cool color patterns. And so when you go to take your first whole organism shot, if you can just take a shot down onto the back so that you can see the pattern of the back of the beetle, you will be able to get down to genus in North America like 95% of the time. And even the AI, I feel like gets me there 90% of the time. The next shot I would do is try to get a side shot so that you can see a little bit of the undercarriage of the beetle. Sometimes that is helpful, but I mean, a lot of like what drives beetle stuff is just that top shot. However, though, some of the ones that don't have really distinctive patterns like this gorgeous one here, the mouth parts are going to be key for getting even to genus. So a lot of these like not weird, but the wood boring beetles that also tend to have kind of boring colors on them, the mouth parts are really, really important for people to get this kind of down the taxonomic ladder. With beetles and a lot of insects, if you can get out there when it's still cold in the morning or cool in the morning, you'll have a much better chance of being able to get all of your photographs done before the organism decides to leave, just because they're kind of nice and cold. I know a couple like insect experts that actually bring with them an ice pack that they'll kind of hover over the organism, not put it on there, but just to give a nice little kind of cold shadow before they step in to shoot it. I'm not quite there yet. I just like to let things be and try and shoot them as fast as possible. But this is where that clip-on macro lens is going to come in very, very helpful. One other trick with beetles, especially for ones that you find on plants. Beetles' favorite defense for ones that are on flowers is the I'm just letting go of everything move, which is they will just pull their legs in and just fall back off the flower. And so if you're ever approaching a beetle and it is warmed up in the day, what I will always do is I will put my hand underneath the flower first, and then I'll move in with my camera, because 9 times out of 10, they will just jump off into your hand. But if they jump off and they land down in the grass, forget about it. Good luck ever finding them again. So that's just the way to do the safety shot with the beetles. And that's also one thing to think about for these things that move, is doing what I call a safety shot, which is I will take something that is not my preferred photograph before getting to the organism. So just in case it leaves before I get there, I at least have one image of evidence that it was there. This is really critical with flying insects. So I will take a photograph from as far away as I can that gives me an idea that it's there, and then I will approach for my setup shots, or my 3 to 4 shots for identification. Go ahead and move on to the next one. So those pesky things that fly away, Diptera, the flies, the mosquitoes, crane flies are definitely ones that do this. And so taking a safety shot is really helpful. A lot of times those safety shots, they're not going to get you down to species, but at least you'll have evidence of the organism to upload to something like iNaturalist. If though you can get them to slow down, like it's cold in the morning, or in this case, this one was just dead. It was on my windowsill, which makes it much easier to shoot, unfortunately for it. I can get the 3 shots that are critical for most Diptera, flies, mosquitoes, crane flies, those sort of things. You want a whole organism shot from the top. And what this gives you is a couple things. It gives you what the pattern of the body looks like, how the segmentation of the body is, which can be very helpful with a lot of these Dipteras. And really critical is you can see the leaf veination, where the veins are in, not the leaf, sorry, in the wings. I'm still back on the last slides. The wing veination is really important on a lot of flying insects. And so I sometimes will take my first photograph from the top just to make sure I got it. And then I will start to move a little bit until I get where the veins are most present. And then I'll do another shot. For the Dipteras, they've got these little things called halteres that kind of float out beneath the wings. They're the gyroscopes of the Diptera world. The shape of those a lot of times can be helpful for identification, especially on classic flies. And so being able to get a photograph of that is really helpful. And the way you get that is just kind of try to get almost eye level with your subject and just shoot from the side. And so in this case, the haltere on this fly is just beneath the wing. It's this kind of white appendage right here. With things like crane flies, it's really obvious. You can see the halteres from a couple feet away. And then the other thing you want to make sure you get is just a headshot with a lot of these flies. So that way they can see the mouth parts and the eyes. The way the eyes are laid out, coloration, things like that can be very helpful for these Diptera experts to identify. On the next slide, we're going to look at land snails. And this is one of the ones where I'm sure the mollusk lovers on iNaturalist have just been like, when is Damon going to learn to shoot all the shots that we need? Because I've definitely shot for like 5 years just doing the first shot here, which is what I expect for a snail, right? Oh, you can see the shell. You can probably identify this. No, you need that shot so that you can see the spiraling of the shell, the texture of the shell. But just equally as important as what I've learned is the shot of the back of the shell, because you want to be able to see what they call the tooth. You want to be able to see how the shell actually circles up here. Is it solid? Is there a hole going in the back? And to be honest, having the slug out sometimes is not helpful. So sometimes if I can find a deceased member and their shells left behind, getting the shots there make it easier for land snail experts to be able to identify it. The other one that is not always critical, but the mollusk experts will love you forever, is if you can also do this side angle shot. And what this does is it gives us an idea of how thick the shell is and the axis on which that spiral is taking place. And there's a number of snails in North America known as shoulder bands. And so being able to see this distinctive line and that axis that the spiral is taking place is critical for being able to get a good ID on them. Luckily, though, out of all the organisms that aren't plants and fungi, these are the easiest ones to shoot because most of them aren't terribly speedy. Let's go for our next taxon group. Since we're with the mollusks, let's talk about bivalves, because this is also one of those ones that I always just thought, if I just take a picture of the top of the shell, I'm sure people can identify this because people have been into shells since Linnaeus and before, right? And that can get you pretty far. You can usually get down into family with a top photograph of the shell. But what you also want to get, if possible, and this is only, of course, on a deceased member, is a photograph of the inside of the shell. But for live and deceased, the other critical shot is getting a side profile. So being able to see how big this ridge is here where bivalves connect is very, very helpful for identification of genera and sometimes species. So if you can get these 2 shots, at least with your live ones, and these 3 with your dead ones, you'll do a grand service for the mollusk identifiers. And the beauty about shells is, I mean, you can go out if you have access to a coast or even a lot of the lakes in North America, and you can find a good portion of the species from that water in, an hour at the beach. But you want to be able to make sure you're getting the right photographs in order to get those identifications. One other thing that is actually, that is critical in that shot there that I didn't speak about before, but is also being able to give people an idea of the size. So you can bring a little ruler with you and do that. And I didn't do any photographs with rulers in this one, specifically because I know a lot of us are going out there without a ruler. And so we have to think about other ways that we can show people the size. Remember, I said I'm not a fan of getting my hand in photographs, but this is where I will make an exception occasionally. Is put my hand in there so I have an idea of how big the shell is. And sometimes I'll do this for other organisms, especially when I have my clip-on macro lens. I think it might be hard for someone to interpret how big it is. So sometimes I will literally just stick my finger in there as the scale. Or I actually wear this ring that I know exactly the size on it. So a lot of times I'll just put this ring down by it. Or you'll see a lot of people that will put pennies or nickels down by it. Just something to give scale is very, very helpful for identifiers, especially for small stuff. So keep that in the back of your mind for all of these organisms. Now we're going to get to some of these ones that are relatively easy for identifiers as long as you can get a single shot. So fish, it blows me away how good fish identifiers are on iNaturalist. All you need to do in like 95% of the time is get a side profile shot where they can see the fins, the general color pattern of the fish, and you will have IDs rolling in within 2 or 3 days. On a few fish, close-ups of the fins can help, but I would say wait until somebody starts asking you for those before you're going out of your way to try and get those fin shots, because on a live one that's swimming away from you, that is really hard to do. And so I wouldn't put the effort in until somebody starts asking you for that. And fish, I would say, are kind of similar to birds in this respect. The bird community is so strong on eBird and iNaturalist that a lot of times, we can go to the next slide, that if you can get just a single profile shot of most birds, like it gets identified before I feel like I'm done uploading it half the time to iNaturalist, because the birder community is just the birder community. And I kind of get the impression it's the same way on eBird these days. But occasionally people will say, oh, do you have a photograph of either the chest or the back? I'm only seeing this side of it. So if you can get a shot of the front and the back of the birds, you will be, I can almost say guaranteed a species level call, if not a subspecies with some of these birds. But sometimes you just don't get that, right? Because they're in and out really quickly. So just getting a single clear shot is really helpful. Heads, if you have, like sometimes you're sitting there and the bird's up in a tree, right? And you basically have 2 options. I'm getting the head or I'm getting the back before this thing leaves. If you can get the head, you're probably going to get a lot more IDs off of that than just the back. So prioritize getting a head shot, then a back shot, then a chest shot. And that's kind of my big tip for birds. I'm always blown away at the level of ID skills of birders. In fact, so much so that one time I took a photograph of a bird and then purposely manipulated in Photoshop to see how bad of a photograph I could upload before people didn't identify it. Mind-boggling, mind-boggling. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Safety. Probably should have talked about this at the start before we get all excited about getting up close to organisms, shooting them, but that's my bad. I didn't reorder the deck in time. Respect nature. First of all, we want to make sure that we're not stressing out these organisms that we love and are trying to get images of. So anytime I can, do as much of the photography from a distance as possible. Sometimes with the cell phone, that's a little bit harder to do, right? But a lot of the cell phones now have a pretty good zoom. So start by shooting out a little further away. And especially if you notice something is going on with that organism, like they're starting to act weird, back up, give them space, let them do their thing. You'll see another one in your lifetime, most likely. So, and that's good for them, and it's also good for you. because occasionally you might be shooting something that you don't realize is dangerous and you don't want to be close to it. I have a personal experience with that where I was accidentally shooting a snake that I thought was a harmless rat snake, and it happened to be the 10th deadliest snake in the world. And I only found that out after I uploaded to iNaturalist, and somebody was like, oh, there's a morphotype that's totally black. And I was like, oh my God. So good for you and good for the organism. And that's the best way to avoid potentially dangerous situations, is giving those organisms distance. The other side of it too is go to great lengths to see stuff, but don't go to great lengths that put you in danger. So that's, don't hang off the side of cliffs trying to shoot dudleyias or other plants that like to be on cliffs. Find one that's more accessible, or just bring different gear to shoot that, or be happy with a mediocre photograph that's not putting you at peril. Because the last thing we want to see is people getting injured during this process, right? You're going out there for the desire and the love of these things. And what's going to allow you to do more of that is not getting injured while you're out there, and then not injuring the organism. For plants, this is one we usually don't talk about much, because usually we think about deadly things like snakes and spiders and stuff like that. Some plants do have contact dermatitis, and so you do want to be aware of anything like that in your area. That's things like poison oak, nettles, things with stinging cells, things like that. You'll also find stinging cells right within cnidarians, things like sea anemones and jellyfish. But one of the things people don't think about with plants very often that I do want to highlight is some plants, if you're coming up and trampling really close to them, and a lot of people are doing this, right, it can damage their root system, and over time that plant can die. And so if you notice you're in an area where there's a lot of kind of trampling going on, give that thing space. Don't be another person kind of putting pressure on those roots. Take your photographs from a distance and let that soil not get compacted. Those are my kind of general kind of respect nature and how to be safe doing this out in the environment. We'll go ahead and move on to the next one. When to participate. Well, I mean, you can become an addict like me, and I participate every day. iNaturalist now is just part of my everyday behavior. And at first, I was kind of like, why am I doing this? And now, like, with a couple years in, I really see this, which is I have a much better appreciation for every environment I go to, because I can see the biodiversity there. And so by trying to kind of do it even in places you don't think about doing it, what you'll learn is you'll learn a greater appreciation for the biodiversity that's there and what affects it. And that puts us in a better position when we talk about ultimately kind of taking care of this stuff and getting involved in conservation, because you understand how the system works because you've spent time looking at all those details. And so, like, the background for me is I started off doing this in downtown Oakland, super urban dense zone. But because I started looking, I started finding diversity. Within the park that was 2 blocks from my house, I think I've got something like 10,000 observations at this point and like 2,000 species for an urban center. And then those skills, when I go out someplace that's natural, translate to me basically barely moving at all, because I can just find stuff all the time. It will be one of those things that is like a blessing for you, because you'll go out someplace and you can find awe and wonder just in about any place you ever visit. When to participate? There's big things that can pull people in, like the City Nature Challenge that happens every April. There's local BioBlitzes that are a lot of times listed on SciStarter and on iNaturalist. And so there's lots of places you can find out how to get involved. And to be honest, going through one of those is one of the best places to start, because you get to do it with other people. You get to learn with them. You get to learn how they read the environment and see things. And we do this together, right? It's a really good social thing to do. So on to the next one. If you've had any questions that have come up, you can drop them into the Q&A, or you can drop them into the chat, and then we can kind of dig into a couple of those. And since I was blabbing and not looking at the chat, Emma, I'm going to rest upon you to pull out stuff that we should talk about.
Absolutely. The chat actually has a lot of advice from other people who find other ways to get through an obstacle. I wanted to ask about one. Mark, you added a comment about a small gray card that can fit in your wallet that can be a handy alternative to using one's hand to hold out a leaf. I'm just curious if there's like a best color card. Is gray like is that like the best?
30% grayscale is what a classic photographer would have with them. I've got one in my wallet as well. Mine is just a little forensics ruler. And this is nice because it can fit in something like a wallet, and then I can pull it out and I can use this to put leaves on. I can also pull it out to put scales on. So little tiny gray forensics ruler is like the way to go for having a pocket thing. And the reason 30% grayscale is important is because that's what most of your algorithms on the phones and things and cameras are using to calculate what that exposure should be. And most modern phones too will also white balance now using that grayscale, which is really, really nice because that way you know that you're getting the right colors in the image too. Great, great feed in that comment. Thank you.
Yeah. There were a couple of comments about questions, or sorry, questions about colors. Any tips on photographing white flowers? Mine are always washed out, from Kathleen.
So with the ones that are washed out, what I would do is first try to put your shadow over it. So probably what's going on is you're getting direct sunlight on there and the background is dark. And then that first tip, or one of the first tips I talked about in art, which was when you're on your camera, if you're taking a photograph and you hold down on your camera, you can auto focus and auto exposure lock. And then I can slide my finger up and down to then control the exposure. And so you can just slide it down until your flowers aren't blown out.
I never knew. I knew that the lock thing shows up, but I never knew you could actually adjust it. That's awesome.
A fifth grader taught me, so.
Yes, go fifth graders. Your instructions about photographing fungi, etc., showed a mushroom pulled out of the ground. Was that already pulled out of the ground, or was it?
No, I did that, and that's because like for people that work with plants, they're like, oh my God, I would never do that. With fungi, it's totally okay. Remember, this is like the apple from the apple tree. And so what I would do is I'm only going to remove one, and I'm going to try and pop up one that's already really mature. So all those aspects are going to be there on it, and I can photograph that. Even though I've popped that up and I've broken it away from the mycelium, it still has plenty of juice in it to then let spores go. And so I haven't disturbed the process at all. In fact, one thing to think about is most fungi, they're actually looking for somebody to come and disturb them, be it a mammal to come bite them, a fly to come under them and get coated with spores and fly off. And so you're not doing any harm when you're doing that with fungi.
Awesome. Yeah, there was a question about where to get a forensic ruler. Probably a lot.
There's a lot of places. The place I get it from, I don't have a partnership with them and everything, but Oregon Rules is the place. And it's a forensics like classroom place, and they have them like packs of 30 for really cheap. So I usually buy a pack of 30 and then just give it out to all my friends.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it seems like a good class size type of thing. You can hand it out to your classrooms if any of your teachers are working with a group anyway. BioBlitz swag, why not, right?
Yeah, it's a great BioBlitz swag.
Absolutely. What to do for next City Nature Challenge. I'm already thinking about it. Those are excellent questions. I'm positive there are more that may come up. I'm going to steal the spotlight momentarily just to share a couple other resources for you that you can access. And then we will say our goodbyes. And if there are any more questions, you can drop them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll take note of them to ask them and get them answered for the follow-up email too. So if you do still have more, if we didn't cover it, we'll go through and check that for you. Awesome. Okay, so last things, our libraries as community hubs for citizen science is a really big program through SciStarter, and we are really big fans of making sure that we have things that are helpful to you. And I already can think of things that are really easy to add to the Exploring Biodiversity kit, so exciting times. But I did want to note there are quite a few books that you can pick out to actually learn about nature photography. Damon, do you have a favorite by chance? I don't know if it's on this list. I'm just
I don't have it off the top of my head. I can send it to you though for the email back out.
Amazing. Yeah. And any of you, if you have advice for ones that really helped you out, feel free to drop them into the chat and we will add them to our tips list from our attendees, which is awesome. Thank you all for having tips. I love it. They're mostly for smartphones, the ones that we have on our list. So the link that was dropped, actually not dropped yet, actually, it might be on the next page. We will drop the link in the follow-up email regardless, but it's a document where you can see all the different books that we recommend, and they're available in multiple formats, of course, but maybe they're not only about photography, but about nature, and they have excerpts on photography, so you can kind of dig deeper into the types of animals too, and then learn about photography. Oh, I love it. Thank you for the, yes, okay. Also, there is a library kit for citizen science projects that's specific to iNaturalist. So if you go and see if any of your libraries nearby have citizen science kits through the library page on SciStarter, you can find out if they have this specific kit that I have a picture of, and they have the micro lenses for you. So if you need to have supplies, or you're sure you need supplies before you get started because you're going to be far away, you're trying to take care of that safety aspect, all those might be able to really help you. And I'm already thinking of the things that we can add to that kit, or libraries maybe want to add to kits, like that little tiny ruler, or the mirror, or the 30% grayscale card. All these lovely things. Any librarians on here? Get working now. So there are a lot of options to find resources. iNaturalist and eBird and most of these websites that use, or most of these projects have access to tools or like guides for you to use for their specific projects. I know iNaturalist has a very, very robust FAQ about all this too. So if you really wanted to be super duper prepared, or you need quick answers to things, they have a lot of resources on their website as well. All right, that was my spiel for libraries, so we can make sure we fit that in. We have 3 minutes, so I'm just going to let you all know what is coming up next, and then we can try to answer some of those other questions. Next week, if you want to join us again, we're talking about auroras, and we would love to learn from you if you've seen auroras, or if you want to be involved in taking pictures of auroras. We'll be talking to the Aurorasaurus team, Liz McDonald from NASA, her photographer Hugo, and the program manager Laura, who will be joining us as well. So fun things there. You can always find out how to join our SciStarter Live by going to the blog, and we will have a singular link for you starting next week. So exciting time. As always, we have a million resources, and we'd love you to use them. Awesome. Okay. Last questions. I saw one and then it disappeared, or commentary. In Facebook's Herb said, is it ever okay to put something in a container to take a photo of it, or would that always require a permit? Can you describe what getting a permit entails? Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, in most places, I would say that you're going to need to get a permit. And a lot of times I would just talk to the ranger station and say, hey, I'm doing this type of stuff. What can and can't do here? And so that's usually the way to approach it. And it's going to be very land manager specific. And so that's where to start, is with the local ranger or the local land manager. I typically try not to do that, just because it slows me down to put things in containers, and I feel bad for some of the organisms too. And some of these things I really do not want to touch with my hands, especially amphibians and stuff like that. You don't want to accidentally give them something that's on you. And so it's another reason not to touch stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah, that can tie in a lot with safety. So just be mindful of that. You said that sometimes they reach out about getting permits so that you can send a sample of an organism. So would you recommend only if that's being asked of you? Then
yeah,
that would be.
Yep. You're going to have that permit before you initiate contact. And so you'd want to kind of plan out your expedition way ahead of time.
Excellent. Okay. I don't want to push beyond the time because I know you have to run to catch a flight. So I will just let you know if there are any unanswered questions that I can't find answers to for you. This has been amazing. Thank you so much for being with us during this time. This was awesome. I've learned so much, and everyone in the chat has been incredibly vocal about how awesome all this information is for multiple different things, not even just nature photography. So thank you.
Yep. And like send those questions you can't get to me, and I'll do my best to answer them. And then if people have questions that come up, way down the road, I'm just at Damon Ty on iNaturalist, and so you can always find me there too.
At Damon Ty. I'll make sure to add that to our follow-up as well.
All right. Awesome. I got to run to the airport, so I will see everybody later. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Damon. Have a good one. Safe flight. Awesome. If you are staying on, I can try to move through some of the questions that we are able to answer. For example, Elizabeth, your question about only public libraries can get kits, or can school libraries also? You of course can get kits if you'd like to. No, more the merrier of any kind. Thank you for asking that question. If you are in any form of library ever, or in an organization that has supplies that they loan out to people, you can absolutely invest in kits. We are not the vendors. We just supply like information on the kits and how to get involved. And we have kit building guides on our library page. So we will help you format your kits, and you can just adjust them however you like to your local area. So with the ideas with the little forensic ruler, or the mirror, or maybe you have guides at your library or in your local area that tell you about species that you should watch out for, maybe some like security supplies. I think that would be incredibly helpful, especially for schools, because they're learning about all these things. I personally did not know how to start in terms of like making sure that I'm doing safe behaviors of taking pictures of animals. So that's a big deal. So if you wanted to do kits wherever you are, you could even just build yourself a kit or use our kit guide to figure out how to best build a kit for yourself to go out and hike with the intent to do nature photography. So got lots of options for you. Excellent. I apologize. I'm going as fast as I can without losing anything in the chat to see if we missed any questions. Bob, thank you for mentioning a wildlife photographer I know has a little plastic aquarium he uses to shoot mosquito larvae and other water bugs. That is a great point. There's also, if any of you want to do have the kit for the Globe Observer Mosquito Project, there is a kit guide for that one. There's materials like a Petri dish that you can use. A part of that is pulling up water and putting it somewhere to videotape it or take pictures of it for that project. And it comes with a little, or rather you can buy we have the suggestion for like that powered microscope, so you can look at it in a different area under a more powerful microscope. So that is thank you for mentioning that. That's a good point. Thanks to everyone. Yay. Yeah, thank you everyone who added their own tips. I love this. I was ready to get all the questions, but honestly, it's kind of amazing to also have so many people on here just being ready to help each other. So be sure to not track invasive species around on boots, clothes, equipment. Seeds can be tiny, clingy, but totally. I have one of our colleagues actually spent so much time pulling seeds off of her shoes before heading to Bolivia, I think, heading on a plane so that she wouldn't end up bringing in any type of things from her shoes. So that is a great point. Yeah, be kind to our nature areas. We're not, gotcha. Our Facebook friend, Soteria, sorry if I can't pronounce your name correctly. Do you ship to Greece? We are not the vendors. We just supply the guides for the library. So we don't actually do any of the selling. Our stuff is free. So anything you want on the library site is all about free resources to get you started. It's up to you to decide where you're going to get the materials if you don't have access to the vendors that we have listed as suggestions. So up to you. You can also spray the bottom of your shoes with alcohol to avoid cross-contamination. Awesome. Thank you, James. Oh, that was only, yeah, okay. I was only to host and panelists. So a nice trick to avoid cross-contamination is using alcohol. Cool. All right. Did I miss anyone's question? I hope not. Let's see. It's very helpful. Kudos to the 5th graders. Yes, totally. Is Deborah okay? Tip about bringing a mirror. Yes, thank you for the mirror tip. I think we covered everything. If we missed anything, feel free to reach out to us. We're at info@SciStarter.org, and we will do our best to help you answer that question. And I believe on iNaturalist, Damon said his tag was just his name. I might look that up first before sending it to y'all. I'll add it in the follow-up. But otherwise, that is about it. I'll let y'all have the rest of your afternoon back. Thank you so much if you were able to join for a little bit longer to chat about these things. Happy nature photography. Good luck. Happy hunting is like what I was trying to go with, and that doesn't sound right for this. Does not sound right. Not happy hunting. Don't go hunting. Just take pictures instead. Awesome. Have a wonderful day, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and close out the Facebook. See y'all. Bye, Facebook. See you later. And then goodbye webinar recording. I'm going to turn that off for us as well.